Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We like to help you make sense of what they mean, and we talk about what you might do about them. Joining me today is Sophie Wyne. Sophie is the CEO and co-founder of Ariglad. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you want to take just a minute to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is I'm from Canada. I have been running Ariglad for around 3 years, and we work primarily with organizations that are really looking to streamline their communication and want to be as efficient as possible with that communication.
Great. And I know just from reading your bio that you also have an interesting background in cybersecurity, which would be a great topic, but not the one we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about your desire to improve the employee experience, which I think we all think is very key. Maybe we'll come back to what that has to do with cybersecurity, if anything, later on in the episode. Does that sound like a good plan to you, Sophie?
Sounds like a perfect plan.
All right, then let's get into the huddle. So I'm curious what drew you to HR and what specifically the focus on the employee experience from kind of where you were before that?
Definitely. Well, funny enough, it actually starts out in cybersecurity. So I had worked in the software kind of cybersecurity space for a little while and worked primarily with Fortune 500 organizations to identify and mitigate risk. So obviously cybersecurity risk. I had worked in a myriad of different industries and cultures. I had a lot of friends in HR, and something that kind of came up as a recurring pattern was that there was this constant looking for data from employees, understanding what they care about, what are the trends. And one of the things that was kind of an aha moment for me working in cybersecurity was how prevalent that information is to most other departments. Everyone else has that dashboard of exactly what's going on at any given time, all real-time data. And so we really set out to basically provide that to HR folks and giving them a real-time view of what employees are talking about, what they care about, being able to look at what's going on in Hong Kong today for sales, and being able to do that is really exciting.
That's great. I know the employee experience probably means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but if you had to describe it in a few words or a sentence, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it's really team driven. I think it's really going to be kind of a product of your total environment, whether that's your manager, whether that's your team. And it's also extremely critical. I think we have seen over the past few years, especially how important employee experience is for retention, but also productivity. So they're much more productive if they're challenged and happy and understand what's going on. And so I think kind of combining those two and understanding what that means is really critical to the success of an organization.
Yeah, I think, and that's becoming quite a challenge I've seen recently where productivity has been down the last 5 or 6 quarters. So it's clearly an issue that not just HR, but the entire organization is grappling with.
Absolutely. I think we're definitely having a moment, of understanding where we're going to go from here. We just went through a global pandemic, and that completely shifted the employee experience. And now we're getting back to what a new normal looks like. And so I think it's a really important conversation to have to kind of understand where we're going to go from now.
Yeah. Or what do you see as some of the main problems with the employee experience today, or some of the main challenges? And were those always there, or did you see some of them arise over the last 3 years with the disruption of the pandemic?
I think it's a combination. I would say employees not having a total understanding of what's going on, to say very easily or kind of a blanket statement, is a huge crippling effect for the employee experience. And that could be anything from understanding what's required of them, what are their goals, what are their metrics, understand where the company is going, what kind of overall goals are they striving for, and then also understanding how culture works, what is expected from them from a communication standpoint, how should they best socialize with their coworkers, understanding where they are going within an organization, what does that promotion trajectory look like, and what works best for them. So I think from an employee experience standpoint, one of the most important things an organization can do is really just give employees all the information that they need in a way that makes sense so they can perform best and be as satisfied as possible.
Yeah, I would agree. I do see that as a big challenge in an organization, especially not just the disruption of the pandemic, but any of the kinds of disruptions that organizations go through regularly. I mean, with the economic environment, organizations are laying off. And so now other people have to pick up the slack for people that aren't there anymore. And they're acquiring companies. So there's integration happening and who does what. There's just so many transformations going on in organizations. It's a challenge to keep up, and employees need a way to find that information and be able to know what's expected of them.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely something that has not been overlooked, but I think could be talked about more, is just really emphasizing bringing employees into the loop and giving them the tools that they need to understand what to make of this constantly changing world and for their organization.
Yeah. Sometimes this kind of topic is hard to address with the C-suite. You know, tell me what the real problem, how do I define that problem in a way that the CEO is going to understand and going to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to give you some money to help you fix that problem or address it?
Yeah, I would say data is king or queen. Data is the absolute thing that you cannot change. It either is or it isn't. So what I mean by that is if you bring data into the fold of this is how employees are feeling, or this is how employees are performing, and this is what it means for XYZ, that's where you get a hold of the C-suite. And that works for every department. For cybersecurity, that means you have X amount of risk. And if this isn't taken care of, you have X amount of dollars at risk. I think at the end of the day, a business is a business, and they need to keep their revenue. They need to keep whether it's attrition or whether it's customer success or what have you, it all revolves around making sure that the company is as strong and stable as possible. And so when you bring data into the C-suite office and give them the tools that they need to understand what the problem is, that's when you're able to get the buy-in you need for solutions. And so that's what we've seen be really successful. And yeah, I would say just really ensuring that you're coming from a metric standpoint has been extremely helpful when, especially talking about new budget, because that's the ultimate kind of numbers.
Yeah. What are the dollars?
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, in today's environment, really, it has to be topical as well. Like, how am I going to do more with less? And how are we going to increase productivity in the organization if we can't do X, right? So some of those types of things may or may not be relevant given the current economic environment. But, I think anytime you can turn that into something that speaks dollar signs is going to be ideal. And sometimes it's hard to do that around the employee experience. How do you tell somebody that how your employees feel about the work they do at this organization is costing them money? So that, I think, is the real challenge.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's really, especially right now, is about doing more with less, making sure that you're using all the tools in your tool belt that you already have. And I think the exciting thing and the good news is that a lot of what we've been talking about of how to improve the employee experience generally is free. It's really more about systems and being transparent, providing the right information in the right way. This isn't something where you need to spend $200,000 on a consulting kind of project. This is really just something that employees are looking for. And with the right buy-in from leadership, it's possible to provide.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it takes an effort from the top, right? Yeah. So everybody kind of has to understand what the organizational culture is. And and how they work throughout the organization, because that then finds its way down to every employee in the organization as they start to see how other people respond, react, deal with situations. It's a learning experience.
Completely learning experience. And, the organization, everyone's in this together, and how one employee's experiences can sometimes rub off onto others. And so if employees generally, or even some employees, doesn't even need to be everyone, if some employees have understood and received the information they've gotten from their managers or from the organization, it often trickles into everyone else's kind of plate. So everyone else will understand what's going on. And even if they don't get kind of that pamphlet or that rundown of exactly what's going on, then they're going to understand the goals. They're going to understand what do they need from themselves, what kind of culture is expected of them. And so as long as the information is put out there in some degree, it's going to impact everyone.
Yeah. And I've seen the phrase human first people strategies. Employers are starting to lead with sort of that idea. Have you heard that term? And what about people sustainability? So keeping employees feeling safe, fulfilled, cared for at work. I mean, is that something you see as part of the employee experience? And are you seeing people start to look at other ways to define what's happening?
Definitely. So it's funny. We just talked about putting numbers kind of at the center of everything. I think putting that phrase into the fold actually is the opposite of numbers. It's much less tangible. But the reason that that phrase is being utilized a lot more is because we have now established through studies, through surveys, from everyone's pretty much anecdotal evidence that numbers follow happy employees. And happy employees require a human-centered approach as an organization. And so I think really what that means is working your way backward. So what do employees need in order to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel motivated? What is required of that? And understanding how to achieve that. So I think it kind of gets back to that, ensuring that employees understand what's expected from them. What does that culture entail from them? How can they best reach out to their coworkers or get this type of information? I think once you are able to take care of those needs from an employee, they are not going to have to spend that time themselves trying to take care of that. They're not going to be exerting a lot of energy to keep themselves safe or feel like they need to keep themselves safe. And they're going to be able to really focus on not only their jobs, but being creative, being strategic, collaborating. And that's really where you're able to have this huge push in output from employees and organizations.
Yeah, and the feeling safe one is particularly relevant right now, given all the things that are going on. And even if the risk is small, it doesn't mean people don't go to an office or travel to another city or do something somewhere where they want to feel safe and secure, right? And you as an organization who are asking these people to do travel or to come into an office or whatever, have a responsibility to make sure that that happens.
Definitely.
How are organizations showing or proving, if you will, what the employee experience is to potential employees? So in the recruiting process and that type of thing, I mean, how are organizations kind of showing what that looks like? Are there some specific things they're doing to help new people understand like what the experience would be for them? Because I do think this is just a critical topic right now, and people are they're looking for money, of course, but they are looking for the employee experience and somewhere where they can love what they do and like the people they work with and that type of thing. And so I'm wondering if you've seen or heard any interesting stories about what organizations are doing on that front.
Yeah, I would definitely say in situations where organizations are trying to recruit top talent and really convey the great culture that they've worked really hard to cultivate, it's really important to remember that actions speak louder than words. It's really easy to write on your careers page that, you are transparent and you're caring of employees and all of that. That's pretty much on everyone's career page. But what's not as common is really doing that throughout the interview process, having really thoughtful follow-ups that show that you listen to them in the interview, having thoughtful interview questions, having kind of all of those different touch points that you have with the employee. They're probably going through interviews with many different organizations. And so it's very easy to see which ones stand out in a good way and a bad way, and which are kind of falling in between. And so I think what's most important is to have those action forward kind of, I guess, goals and achievements when it comes to recruiting that top talent. And also remembering, at the end of the day, Glassdoor exists. There are a lot of different places where current employees can talk about their experiences, and that can either be really great or not so great, but hopefully for most, it's good. But also, if there are kind of negative, maybe a Glassdoor review or someone said something on Twitter, everyone has that. That happens to every single organization on the face of the earth. Again, it has to do with how you react, what your actions are. And I think that's really where top talent, that's what they notice.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to look for problems over time, not just single points of data. And I totally agree. I mean, it is a good place to look to just get an understanding of maybe what some of the challenges are. I always read the Amazon reviews, and I always start with the negative ones because I want to know, like, what did people not like about this product? Because that's really going to drive whether I buy it or not. Was it something that I would have wanted it to do or expected it to do? And then I'm like, I'm out. If I see that people are saying, hey, it's not so much about the service, it's about, does the product perform, right? And so people are looking at you as an organization and saying, are they really living up to the standards and the goals that they're setting as an organization? I just did a podcast a couple of weeks ago on the perfect interview, trying to understand from an employer perspective as well as from an employee perspective. And I do think there's a lot of opportunity to convey that message to people. And I think it's important because people are looking for that. They want to belong, right? They want to feel like they're going to add value, not just be another number in the organization.
100%. And I think, to your point, when I'm buying a new product, I always look at the reviews as well. And I always, just like you, start with the worst reviews. But I also am looking for how vendors respond to bad reviews. If the vendor ignores it, or if they deny it, or if they say, hey, so sorry that happened, please let us reach out here, we're going to take care of it. I almost, in my mind, deduct that as a bad review, because I'm like, even if that does happen to me, I know they're going to take care of it. I know they're going to be responsive. And the same goes for employees. If there's a terrible Glassdoor review, but they respond in a way that you think, oh gosh, they really heard them. They, have a process in place to manage that. In some ways, it can actually turn it around and become a positive thing.
Yeah, totally agree. And actually, for a lot of these organizations that have products in the market, there's other things that you can read and review. If you're looking for an opportunity in an organization, read their 10K, read the reviews on their organization on different platforms, right? If you're trying to just get better familiar with the organization.
Yeah, definitely.
Lots of places to look. How are you currently, I know there's some technology behind what you're doing. How are you guys currently using AI or machine learning? And has ChatGPT changed your view about how that might be deployed to support the employee experience?
Yeah, I think it's funny. In some ways, it's changed everything. And in some ways, it hasn't changed anything. So there's kind of like two sides of the coin. I would say ultimately, technology is always changing how we work. This is a constant. The only constant is change. And AI is no different. The goals of leaders are not changing. They're staying the exact same. But at the same time, it has changed everything. I think on a personal note, ChatGPT has incorporated its way into my life much more regularly. I think it's starting to incorporate its way into the tools that I use much more often than before. And AI wasn't really a topic that was discussed until ChatGPT came out. So I think for us, we are actually about to launch our own, not ChatGPT, but essentially a similar AI functionality that's going to be responding to tier 1 questions. One of our big focuses is we really want to make HR teams as efficient as possible. And oftentimes they're responding to the same questions over and over. They're really repetitive, trying to understand like what employees are saying and trying to just get their information that they need from the beginning. And so we're using that AI to essentially provide the first kind of leg of that automation in the HR journey. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think HR has always been such an awesome industry for me because people go into HR because they care about people and they want to work with people and they want to improve their lives. And I think the possibilities of using AI to automate the things that don't make HR fun, like the repetitive tasks or admin or what have you, that's super appealing to me because I think a lot of the time you chat with HRBPs or people in HR, that takes up a lot of their time. And so I think, yeah, like I said, it kind of changes everything from and not changes, but it also just opens up the possibilities. But at the same time, everyone's goals haven't stayed the same. I think it's just widening the possibilities of getting to those goals and achieving them quicker.
Yeah, I think on the one hand, we want to make things more human, this whole human first people strategy, but at the same time, we need technology to help us make it so, right? And so I think it's not the same as calling the number and just getting this automated telephony, right? Where you're like, none of those 6 things match the thing I want to do, right? It really has to be very personalized and begin to be personalized to the individual. Obviously, that make it much more realistic if I'm calling you by the name you go by and asking questions that are going to be relevant if it's, I don't know, related to benefits, right? It's relevant to you and your family, not just sort of hey, here's a general example. If you have 2 kids and a spouse, here's what your options are. It's, hey, we know what you have, and here's the options you have based on your current situation.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly it, Teri. I think, like we were just discussing, AI before this shift was what you just described. It was that nightmare that we've all experienced on a customer service website where you're like asking for help and they just keep responding with the same things and it's just a nightmare. I think what now is possible is, so for this feature, as an example, so we are basically going to be able to plug into a shared inbox on Gmail. We're going to be able to get an understanding of how does HR express itself. Do they use lots of smiley faces? Are they more formal, more informal? And mimic that response to employees and really ensure that they feel like they're chatting with just another HR person. But in reality, it'll be kind of automated from a tier 1 perspective. I think that is where things get really exciting. And again, being able to keep that human first mentality, but in a way that is efficient for everyone. Because at the end of the day, employees want this information as soon as possible. If they are asking about, sometimes it's really important. Like if they're asking about maternity leave benefit, or if they're asking about a hospital visit over the weekend, sometimes you need that information immediately. And so that's another way where technology is just going to be able to give HR that work-life balance, but also making sure that employees are getting their information really fast.
Yeah, I would agree. There's just a boundless possibilities here. I don't know how long it's going to take us to sort of see some of the real results, but I'm hoping it's going to be soon, because I know it not only would be a big benefit to the employee, but HR has they've been buried for the last couple of years, right? They've just had so much on their plate, especially with the pandemic and everything that happened during that process. So anything we can do to get those sort of basic tasks off their plate and automate them will be a big step up.
100%. I couldn't agree more. HR has been through the absolute ringer for the last few years, the pandemic, and then being at the forefront of figuring out hybrid work, and then totally remote, then hybrid. Now we're going through this crazy economy. And so I think it's super important that HR isn't burnt out and they do have the time they need to think about strategy to take care of employees through these massive changes. And so automation and AI is definitely going to be playing a part of that.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think is being done really well in this space? Like, can you think of an example either a company or just a general example of something that an organization is doing that you think is kind of the epitome of the employee experience?
I mean, it's
put you on the spot.
No. I love the question. I think it's always hard to know if you've never been an employee. Every organization has like a reputation. When I think about Google, I think about like bouncy castles and kind of like golf carts going from office to office, but that might not be what it actually is like. I'm sure it's not. I would say there's one interesting organization that I've heard lots of different things about all the biggest companies, but there's one organization that does a really good job in giving employees kind of if not total transparency, they give them the tools they need to understand what's required from them. That's actually Netflix. So Netflix has actually put its stick in the sand to basically say, we are ultimately not a family. Organizations aren't going to, it's not a family. You're not my grandma, you're not my mom, you're my coworker at the end of the day. They really emphasize that they're a team. And I love that mentality of organizations really being like a sports team. Because if you are on the team and you need help with something, you are going to get that help. The rest of the team is going to understand if you've hurt your leg, what needs to happen for you to get back on the field. If you need to learn a play, how are we going to work together to memorize this? And I think that really epitomizes how organizations flourish, because sports teams also require trust between them. They need to know that their teammates are going to be there, but they also know that they have certain goals and that they need to work together to achieve them. And so I think that's a really good example of how organizations can foster that sense of community and bonding between employees and groups as a whole without going down the path of kind of family, because I think that can often be perceived as a little bit fake, because ultimately you can't fire your grandma, but you can fire your coworkers. And so I think that's been done really well at Netflix.
Yeah, I love that. I'll have to read up on that. I hadn't seen that case study, so that'll be interesting. This might tie into that, but if you had to tell someone one thing that would help them improve the employee experience in their organization, or at least someplace where they might start, some advice on where do I begin? How do I even know if I have a problem? And what would you say would be some of the first things that I would do to start to get my head around it and really understand what we need to do about it?
I would say start out by doing some anonymous pulse surveys or having a more regular occurrence where you're getting information from employees of what they need or what they want. I would say understanding where, if there are any cultural weaknesses, identifying those and working to improve them as quickly as possible. A lot of the time, some of the biggest struggles with organizations is having high performers that are maybe toxic. Understanding where those challenges lie and addressing them is super important, because you could run 1,000 anonymous pulse surveys and get all the information in the world. But if you're not fixing the things that are already broken, it's going to be impossible. And so I think really what those are doing is it's fostering a not community, but it's fostering a atmosphere where employees freely feel that they can speak out and that they're not going to be reprimanded. Actually, if there's one free thing to anyone that's listening that they want to do right now, I can't remember the title, but if you look up Google top performing team, Google did a 2.5-year study with all of their employees to understand which teams were the highest performing. And they did a really interesting and good job of basically studying what that means. And one of the biggest things for the teams that were highest performing was feeling comfortable with each other and feeling like they can say anything and they're not going to be critiqued, and having that openness. And I think that's not something that can be fostered immediately, but understanding how to get there is super important. That's a really good place to start.
Yeah, that's a great idea. They've done a lot of different stuff as it relates to HR. So they've got some interesting case studies and other things out there that you can find online pretty easily. So great place to start. Yeah. Is there anything else any other advice you'd have for anyone, or anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up?
I would definitely just say that HR has been on the front lines for so long, and it can often feel exhausting at times. It can often feel wear down, at least from the people I chat with every day. We have advisors and we have customers and everyone. I think just really remembering that employees are behind you at the end of the day. Employees are, you all have the same goals. Everyone is working towards the same mission for the organization. And great culture it's like, what was that saying? Rome wasn't built in a day. Great culture wasn't built in a day. And if you have the want to create that and cultivate it, it definitely is possible with the right buy-in from the right people and organizations. So yeah, I would say just keep listening to podcasts like this and keep reading articles like Google's, and you'll get there.
Yeah, I agree. I think people need to be, HR specifically, be courageous. I think there's a lot of opportunity and people want to know. I think sometimes we're afraid of communicating when the communication is the thing that's going to open the box and free everybody up to really focus. And so we've been very focused on that. We started a new LinkedIn group called Raising the Bar on HR, because one of the things we found in the survey last year was just HR is still lagging in terms of being viewed as a strategic partner in the organization. And I don't think that's because they're not strategic. I just think it's because of a lot of the things we talked about today. There's just a lot of crap that they're having to constantly contend with. And if we could mitigate some of that stuff, then they could really be focused on the people strategies and more so than on answering the detailed questions that everybody has, right? That's just repeated over and over again. So I'm going to do another podcast on that in a few weeks on just being strategic in HR. And so that's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to doing that. It's going to be a live podcast. So wow. Yeah, I'll have to dress up that day since I'm just wearing a sweat jacket today. Well, thank you, Sophie, for joining today. Great conversation. Where can people find you online and on social?
Well, you can find Ariglad, ARIGLAD.com, just on our website. You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. It's just Sophie Wyne, Wyne with a Y. And yeah, we post things regularly as well. We love to collaborate with the HR community, and yeah, excited to chat with anyone that wants to chat.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to our producers, the Brand Method Media Group. Thank you to my marketing team, Lisa and Zoe, who get all this stuff together and get it produced and out there. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. That's all the time we have today. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app or leave us a review if you have a minute. You can also drop us a line or schedule a chat on the website. We'd love to hear from you. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.